They didn't expect me to say yes, not because I wasn't qualified, God knows I was, but because the project had chewed through 3 senior managers in under a year. And when Craig offered it to me, there was a flicker in his eyes, like he expected me to flinch. I didn't. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The stakes? A complete overhaul of our company's global supply chain. 5 years, 6 countries, $32 million in contracts on the line. It wasn't just a project, it was a legacy, the kind that breaks people, or defines them forever. And I wasn't afraid of the work. I was afraid of wasting my potential. I was Zoe Carter, senior operations strategist. I'd spent the last 8 years designing systems, fixing bottlenecks, building relationships no one noticed until things broke. I didn't scream for credit. I let the results speak. But deep down, I wanted more than just being reliable. I wanted to build something no one else could. The first few weeks were a blur of chaos: vendor issues in Vietnam, regulatory delays in Germany, warehouse closures in Texas. But I thrived in chaos. While others saw fires, I saw puzzle pieces. I mapped out new transportation corridors between Manila and Long Beach. I rebuilt the compliance calendar from scratch. I convinced 2 reluctant stakeholders to align on a unified freight strategy without a single escalation. Every spreadsheet, every Zoom call at 3 a.m., every exhausted Sunday night. Gee, it didn't wear me down. It made me sharper. People started to notice, not just internally. Our clients began requesting me by name. Suppliers said things ran smoother when Zoe was involved. I heard Craig tell someone in the hallway, "She's a machine when she's in the zone." But I wasn't a machine. I was a woman who finally saw her shot and refused to blink. This wasn't just about metrics and milestones. It was about finally doing something that mattered and proving, quietly but undeniably, that I didn't need a louder voice. I just needed the right challenge. And for the first time in my career, I felt like I was building something with my name etched into its foundation. Little did I know. They were already sharpening the knife. I stopped counting the late nights around week 6. At first, it was just a few extra hours here and there, tying up budgets, adjusting timelines, patching over vendor misfires. Then it became every night. The lights in the parking garage would flicker off 1 row at a time while I sat alone in the war room, eyes glued to freight invoices and customs declarations. My phone buzzed with Slack messages from opposite time zones: Manila, Berlin, Dallas. I answered them all. There were no pats on the back, no "great job" emails. But I didn't mind, not at first. This project was different. I believed in it. I believed that if I gave everything, every hour, every ounce of focus, someone would notice, not out of pity, out of recognition, out of understanding that I was holding something massive together with nothing but sheer will and spreadsheets. People around me began tapping out, one by one. Jenna took stress leave. Tomas got reassigned. Even my intern quit mid-cycle. I kept going, not because I was stronger, but because walking away would have felt like dropping my own name. Some mornings, I'd catch my reflection in the mirrored elevator doors, hair pulled back, coffee in hand, bags under my eyes, and whisper, "One more week, just one more week to stabilize Germany," or, "Once the LA port issues clear, I'll breathe." But the breathing never came. I missed my sister's birthday dinner. Twice, I fell asleep on a Zoom call. Once, I got sick and kept working through it. Always. Craig barely said a word to me. He forwarded documents. That was our language. Every now and then, I'd overhear him talking about the team holding up well. There was no mention of names, just the team. Still, I held on, because beneath the exhaustion, something stubborn stayed lit inside me. A voice that whispered, "Maybe next month they'll see it. Maybe after this phase." Hope is funny like that. It clings to the frayed edges of logic and dares you to believe one more time. So I kept showing up. I kept fixing things before they broke. I kept making others look good without ever needing to shine. Some call it loyalty. Some call it foolishness. I called it investing in the long game. But what I didn't realize was that someone else was already counting the wins without counting me. It was a Thursday morning when the email hit. Subject: Final Board Approval. Global Ops Redesign Initiative. I stared at the subject line for a full 10 seconds, not daring to click. My hands hovered over the mouse like I was defusing a bomb. Then I opened it, and there it was. The green light. Official. Unanimous. The board had signed off. After 7 months of building, negotiating, sweating through midnight vendor calls, and back-to-back compliance audits, it was done. I stood there, frozen in my cubicle, heart racing like I'd just crossed a finish line no one else had seen. No confetti, no champagne, just the steady hum of office chatter around me, while something monumental shifted inside me. The project was no longer hypothetical, no longer pending. It was real. I had taken it from idea to implementation. Me, Zoe Carter. For a moment, I just closed my eyes and let it settle into my chest like warmth from the first sun after a long winter. Craig walked by my desk half an hour later, holding his usual iced coffee. He didn't stop, just said, "Looks like it's a go," and kept walking. That was it. But I didn't need a parade. Not yet. There was a meeting scheduled the next day. Leadership Ops Review. It wasn't marked as private. My name was on the attendee list. And deep down, I knew what that meant. This was the kind of win that moved people up. We'd brought in projected savings of $14.6 million over 5 years. 3 major vendors had shifted exclusive partnerships to us. Our solution had been featured in a niche industry journal just last week. I had made sure Craig had all the talking points. I'd polished the decks, triple-checked the numbers. I wasn't walking into that room tomorrow as a background operator anymore. I ironed my best blazer that night. The navy one, not flashy, but sharp, clean lines, structured shoulders. It made me feel like I belonged in boardrooms, like I wasn't just managing work. I was leading it. I rehearsed what I might say if asked to speak. I didn't want to sound too eager, but I wanted them to know I was ready, not just for the next milestone, but for the next role, because surely, after this, they'd see me, really see me, and even if no one else said it out loud, I did, quietly, as I turned off my desk lamp and headed for the elevator. You earned this! What I didn't know was that by this time tomorrow, they'd already chosen someone else. The meeting invite hit my inbox at 7:46 a.m. Subject: Check-in, just you and me. From Craig Morrison. Time: 11:30 a.m. Location: Conference Room 4B. There was no agenda, no prep doc, just a note at the bottom. Let's catch up before things scale. I assumed it was about expansion, next steps, maybe even a performance review. Finally! My heart fluttered, just for a moment. Maybe this was it. At 11:27, I walked into 4B with a notepad, my updated roadmap printed in color, and a quiet but ready smile. Craig was already seated. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, it wasn't the expression I expected. No pride, no excitement, just something unreadable. He cleared his throat. "Zoe, we've been watching how hard you've been pushing yourself." I blinked. Pushing myself? Craig nodded slowly, like he was easing into a difficult truth. "We've seen the hours, the late nights, and frankly, we're a little concerned. This level of intensity, it's not sustainable." I waited for the punchline. "Your well-being matters," he continued. "We think it's time for you to step back. Take a breath. 2 weeks, fully paid, mandatory rest. It's not disciplinary, just a pause, for your own good." I couldn't speak. "And while you're resting," he added, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, "Rachel will be stepping in to ensure continuity. You've built a strong framework. We just need to carry it forward now." Rachel, the manager who'd never sat through a full vendor negotiation, the one who still confused customs codes with currency codes. I stared at Craig, willing myself not to react. I'm not burned out," I said quietly. He offered a sympathetic smile, like I'd just proven his point. Exactly. That's how burnout works. You don't always feel it coming. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not from angers, from shame, the kind that swells when someone dresses humiliation in the language of kindness. I was being sidelined, neatly, softly, surgically. I nodded once. Okay. Good, he said, already reaching for his next file. I walked out without looking back, past the break room where I'd spent late nights alone, past the hallway where I once mapped the global rollout on a whiteboard no one else used, past people who didn't meet my eyes. In less than 20 minutes, I'd gone from lead strategist to a cautionary tale. And I still had the roadmaps in my hand. What they didn't realize was, I had built more than just a project. I had built control. And when it crumbled, they'd look everywhere but at the person they told to just rest. I logged into the system that night out of habit. It was 10:43 p.m. I wasn't even supposed to be working. I was on mandatory rest, remember? But I wanted to make sure the vendor routing updates I'd drafted had gone through. Just one last look. The screen blinked. Access denied. I tried again. Same result. I moved to the shared drive. The folders I built: ZC Global Ops, APAC/Rollout, Freight Triangulation. They were gone. Or maybe they were still there. Just not for me. Next, I checked my company email. Blank, no messages, no calendar invites, no signature block, just a generic inbox like it had been wiped for a new hire. My name was gone from the project dashboard. I wasn't even marked out of office. I simply wasn't there. And no one had told me. No notice, no call, not even a polite, HR-crafted transition message. I had been erased, surgically, quietly, cleanly. At first, I sat motionless, staring at the screen like it had insulted me. Then I laughed. Once. Softly. The kind of laugh that rises when there's nothing left to hold on to. I thought of all the hours I'd stayed late while the others went home, all the birthdays I'd missed, the migraines I'd worked through, the times I'd said, "No worries, I'll handle it," just so someone else could go home early. All of it, now reduced to an invisible footprint in a system I no longer had access to. No one said thank you. No one even said goodbye. I used to believe hard work meant something. That staying late would earn you more than silence. Turns out, I wasn't part of the picture. I was just convenient. Until I wasn't. I'd spent years trying to prove myself in quiet ways, letting the results speak, letting others shine, thinking that eventually, someone would look past the noise and say, "Her. She's the one holding this together." But no one ever said it, because they never needed to. I wasn't the story. I was the scaffolding. And now that the structure looked finished, they tore me down and swept the dust away without ceremony. The ache in my chest wasn't anger. It was recognition. I finally saw things clearly. This was never about effort. It was about visibility. And I had made the fatal mistake of thinking I could stay behind the scenes and still be protected. They had my frameworks, my forecasts, my plans. But they forgot one thing. I built the project. I also built the guardrails. And I remembered a clause, one they didn't even know I had written, buried deep in the onboarding protocol, a clause that required final handoff approval from the original lead, me. If that handoff didn't happen within 14 days, the contract would auto-expire. They hadn't asked for my sign-off. They hadn't even known they needed it. And now, they were about to find out what happened when the foundation they stood on quietly disappeared. I didn't panic. That surprised me most. No shouting, no revenge fantasy, no frantic text to anyone still inside. I just sat there in my apartment, the glow of my locked-out screen humming back at me, and I took a slow breath, one, then another, because I wasn't powerless. They thought removing my name from the project would be clean. They thought they could replace me like a broken part in a machine. What they forgot, what no one ever really saw, was that I built the machine, and I built it with guardrails. Months ago, in the blur of compliance meetings and contract negotiations, I'd written a line into our client onboarding protocol. It was small, boring, even. Something legal had glanced at and waved through because it sounded standard. But it wasn't. The clause was simple. Final handoff of any multi-year, cross-regional account must be approved in writing by the project's originating lead strategist. Failure to secure approval within 14 calendar days of client acceptance renders the agreement voidable at the client's discretion. I remember drafting that line at 2 a.m., somewhere between freight escalation reports and port capacity forecasts. I wasn't trying to be clever. I was trying to protect the work, my work, from being hijacked by someone who hadn't earned it. Now, that clause was my calm center in the middle of their storm. Craig hadn't asked for my sign-off. No one had. Rachel probably didn't even know such a clause existed. She never looked that far down in the protocol documentation. She skimmed the summaries, if she read them at all, and the clock was ticking. I pulled up the protocol version from my personal archive, fully timestamped, legally backed, approved. I sent one email, not to Craig, not to HR, to the client's legal team. Polite, professional, direct. Just a reminder to confirm that project handoff documentation has been completed in accordance with Clause 12C. If the original strategist's sign-off has not been secured by day 14, we recommend reviewing the agreement's current validity. That was it. No threats, no emotions. I didn't need drama. I had structure. I had leverage. And most of all, I had time. 8 days left on the countdown. They could still fix it, technically. But to do that, they'd have to call me, acknowledge me, admit that I was more than just a name they deleted. I closed the laptop slowly, poured myself a glass of water, and sat by the window as the city lights blinked below. I didn't feel rage. I felt ready. The next move was theirs. The email landed at 2:17 a.m. Not with a bang, just a soft ping in a forgotten inbox. The kind people check without urgency. But this one was different. Subject: immediate termination of agreement. Clause 12C breach. I was asleep when it came in. But at 6:08, coffee in hand and mind already anticipating another day of forced stillness. I opened my inbox out of habit. My breath caught the moment I saw the sender. Clients at Valkoriental, Occam. I clicked. And then I smiled. The message was crisp and formal, clearly drafted by someone who didn't waste words. It referenced Clause 12C, quoted it verbatim, then stated the obvious. No documented approval from the original lead strategist had been submitted within the 14-day window. As a result, Valcor International had elected to void the entire agreement, effective immediately. I read it 3 times. Not because I needed clarity. I wanted to savor it. They hadn't looped in Craig. Not yet. The message went directly to legal, to operations, and, bless their meticulous habits, to me. My name still lingered in some automated alert system, a remnant no one had scrubbed clean. I imagined the moment it would hit Craig's inbox. His eyes narrowing, his voice rising, his half-formed questions. Then Rachel, fumbling for words she didn't understand. Then Dana from finance, realizing the projected Q3 revenue spike had just evaporated. And all of it, so quiet. There were no sirens, no alarms, just an early morning ripple. This isn't revenge, I thought. This is accountability, delivered in silence. For a brief moment, I pictured Felix, the junior analyst I used to mentor. He always asked the hard questions during budget meetings, the kind that made others roll their eyes. "Zoe," he once whispered, "do you ever feel like you're the only one doing the actual work here?" I had smiled then, but now, that question echoed like prophecy. They didn't just delete my name, they deleted their lifeline. I imagined Felix seeing the email. He'd understand. He'd know this wasn't some act of retaliation. It was structure doing what structure does when handled carelessly. Collapse. I reread the final line again. All integration, implementation, and partner transition efforts are to cease pending renegotiation. Cease. Not pause. Not reconsider. Cease. They thought I'd rest. Instead, I waited. And now, Everything they tried to carry forward without me was falling apart under its own weight. I closed my laptop slowly, the edges of a smile still resting in the corners of my mouth. No rage, no noise, just a quiet truth. You don't need to raise your voice when your silence is already echoing through their walls. By 7:12 a.m., the office was already vibrating with unease. It started with a calendar alert being canceled, vendor alignment check-in, canceled. Then came a flood of red flag emails from Valcor's integration team, one by one. Status threads were halted. External logins revoked. Shipment forecasts withdrawn. Craig's name appeared in a flurry of email chains marked urgent, contract voided. Rachel hadn't even made it through her first coffee when she was summoned to the 14th floor conference room. Dana from finance was already there, pale and tight-lipped. It joined the call 15 minutes later, followed by legal. By 8:03 a.m., panic had a shape, and it was shaped like Clause 12C. Craig was unreachable for 27 minutes. When he finally stormed into the conference room, half-buttoned and clearly unshaven, the silence hit him like a wall. Rachel tried to speak first. I didn't even see that clause. You didn't see it? Dana snapped. You were the one who signed the revised onboarding protocol. But I didn't draft it, Rachel cried, voice cracking. Zoe wrote all that back-end documentation. No one even asked me to check it. Dana turned to Craig. This is a $32 million failure. Gone. Overnight. What do you have to say? Craig ran a hand over his face. We can renegotiate. It's not over. No, Craig, said Jeremy, the senior legal counsel, who had joined by phone. Valcor's message was clear. The agreement is void. Their board doesn't want to renegotiate. You ignored their terms. The room went dead quiet. Across the office floor, junior analysts whispered in corners. Slack channels filled with cryptic emojis and clipped updates. They're in the war room. Rachel's crying. Valcor pulled everything. In procurement, Carla was already fielding calls from vendors whose contracts were contingent on the Valcor rollout. One replied, no Valcor, no bulk discount. Prepare for requote. By 9:30, the company's internal systems were visibly slowing down. Shared drives showed error messages. Approval queues clogged with unresolved routing. Someone in IT whispered that Zoe's archived permissions had triggered an internal compliance lock when her sign-off wasn't recorded properly. Entire workflows had collapsed behind that one unchecked box. At 10:11 a.m., an emergency board meeting was called. Craig wasn't invited. Neither was Rachel. Inside the room, the remaining leadership team stared at projections blinking red across a 70-inch screen. There was no way to spin it. No one to blame publicly without exposing the truth. The company had tried to erase the one person who built everything, and had failed to notice she held the key. Outside that room, Craig sat in his office, phone on silent, staring at a contract folder with Zoe's initials still on the original draft. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. And Zoe? Zoe hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. The company was crumbling not because she pushed back, but because no one else knew how to hold it up. By noon the next day, the office was silent, at least from my side. No one called. No one emailed. No one even sent a text asking, "Hey, what happened?" It wasn't that they didn't have questions. It was that they didn't know how to ask them anymore. The company was unraveling by the minute. Vendors were backing out. Internal teams were stalled, and I was still sitting in my apartment, sipping tea like it was just another afternoon. Felix, the junior analyst, finally sent a Slack message. I didn't say anything, but I saw it coming. Thank you for how you handled things. Quiet, precise. You didn't have to, but I'm glad you did. I didn't reply. I just reacted with a emoji. That was all that needed to be said. By now, the company knew exactly what had happened. Clause 12C had done its job. The same systems they once praised me for building had quietly closed behind them like a vault door. And I'd never raised my voice, never leaked a thing, never threatened. That's what scared them the most. Had I screamed, they might have dismissed me as emotional, Had I fought openly, they might have felt justified in their decision to sideline me, but I didn't give them that luxury. I just disappeared and let the weight of my absence do the talking. I pictured Craig sitting in his corner office, blinds down. As the board questioned everything, Rachel probably hadn't shown up at all. It had likely spent hours trying to reverse the damage, only to realize that nothing was broken, just sealed. Not a single person asked me to return. Not a single person apologized. No awkward HR follow-up. No let's chat calendar invite. Because reaching out meant admitting they had made a mistake, and none of them had that kind of courage. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Not for me, it was confirmation. For years, I had been the woman behind the curtain, the fixer, the architect, the problem solver no one invited to the photo ops. They thought I was just operational support. But now they knew. I had been holding the ceiling up the whole time, and the moment they pulled me out, the structure collapsed. I didn't feel smug. I felt centered. There was no need to return, no interest in salvaging something that had treated me like an afterthought. Let them rebuild without me. Let them sit with the lesson. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just leaves the room and takes the stability with it. By evening, I got a LinkedIn message. Not from Craig, not from anyone internal. It was from Valcor International. We'd like to schedule a conversation with you directly. The board has approved a special strategy position for global operations. Full autonomy. Let us know when you're free. I smiled, closed the tab, and leaned back in my chair. The silence I'd left behind was doing more work than 1,000 speeches ever could. 1 week later, I walked into a boardroom that didn't know my past but recognized my value. The walls were glass, the skyline sharp against the morning sun, and at the center of the table sat 3 of Valcor's global strategy leads. Waiting for me, they stood when I entered. No clipboard, no printouts, just a handshake and a statement. We've reviewed everything. You built what they tried to steal. We want you to build it again, this time, for us. No politics, no layers of red tape, just clarity. They offered a role titled Executive Director of Global Operations Strategy, double my previous salary, autonomy over team selection, direct access to the CEO. It wasn't just a new job. It was an invitation to shape something real. With my name on it this time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't need to think about Craig, or Rachel, or the silence that followed when everything I'd built fell apart behind me. That chapter had closed itself. This was a new beginning. I showed up to my first day at Valcor in a soft charcoal suit. Clean lines, no armor, just confidence. Felix had followed me too. He resigned 3 days after the fallout and asked if I'd consider him for my team. I said yes, not because I owed him, but because he saw me before anyone else did. And that morning, I stood at the head of a new table, new city, new company. But this time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't the underdog. I wasn't the support act. I was the architect, fully credited. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's walking into the future they thought they stole from you, like you owned it all along. They erased me from a system I built, so I built something they could never touch. And this time, I didn't knock. I walked in, and the room stood up.